Hey friends. Um, so I can see myself being mirrored just over there on my laptop, which is cool. I think the microphone is working now. I can see the levels are decent. So I just wanted to ad lib in front of the camera for a while to get used to doing this. So I wanted to talk about the cycle I've been through to discover that there's a market for my course. So the kind of being on Twitter, figuring out that people are interested in this Alexander technique stuff, and just the back end process for how I've gone from no idea this was a thing to launching a course in a couple of weeks' time. Because I didn't really set out to be here. It's something that's evolved on its own in a somewhat playful and natural way. And I don't think I could have set out to be here. But here I am anyway, and it's kind of fun. So if I cast my mind back to, I guess, late last year, early this year, is when I started tweeting about Alexander technique. And that was really just because I was interested in it. And I was, at the time, I was tweeting about lots of things: carbon removal, energy system stuff, productivity. And Alexander technique was just one of the things that I thought, hey, this could be fun. And my initial ambition, I guess, was that someone would come along and say, hey, this is well known, this is well established, just go and look over here, it's called X, and that's it, and I'll be done. Okay, cool. So I guess what I wanted to know is, like, what is this thing that I've learned, and how does it relate to everything else? But that didn't happen. No one said, oh hey, this is done, there's nothing new here. People were responding such that there was something new here, and that intrigued me, so I kept going. And people just kept kind of saying, oh hey, this sounds like something else, but there still seemed to be something new and additional to it. That's why I kept going. So the more this happened, the more I thought, okay, cool, well, I'm going to use Twitter as a medium to explore what this thing might be. I quite enjoyed the character constraints, I enjoyed the format, and I enjoyed the fact that people could comment on very specific elements of an overall thread of logic. So not only were the tweet threads themselves quite short, but I was atomicizing the concepts into 280 characters, and then people could riff on those particularly narrow or specific concepts, which really helped me. So as this thread of threads evolved, I just kept going, and it picked up. And I realized that what I was doing was essentially teaching the thing through the Twitter threads. It wasn't just that I was explaining concepts, but I was putting games into it. I was trying to think, how can I communicate what this thing's about via the medium of Twitter? And that seemed to work. People were kind of playing the games, they were reporting back on what worked and what didn't work. And that let me very quickly, iteratively play with how I could change the games, how I could correct for those traps that I saw people falling into. And from there, it led to me thinking, well, if I can do this by words, surely I can do it, I can get more depth by doing it on a Zoom call. So it kind of built up this bedrock of, hey, this is working via a tweet thread setup. Let me do Zoom calls now and see what happens. And I remember when I started that, I had a week off work because my employer basically made us take an amount of leave mid-year so we wouldn't rack it up towards the end of the year given COVID. So I had a week off at home during lockdown here in London. And I just thought, okay, why don't I put out a call on Twitter saying, hey, if you want to have a 45-minute Zoom call with me, sign up here, kind of thing. And I had, I think, 15 or 16 calls that week. And to keep that playful for me, rather than making it work and a stressful thing as a service I was offering, I decided to do that on a donation basis. So people could pay me money if they wanted to, but I wasn't doing it as a kind of, hey, I'm a teacher of this thing, please pay me money for a lesson. It was, hey, let's explore something and see what works. And if you think it's if you want to support what I'm doing here, then feel free to give me money. And I realized over the course of those calls, I had quite a few, and it worked. People were responding in a way that suggested that they were getting something. and being able to have the calls meant that I could see in real time how people were responding to my instructions, my games, the concepts, and I wasn't trying to develop any kind of framework or any kind of process there. It was just the fact that I was doing 15 first lessons, if you like, kind of first times people saw what I was doing, and kind of came into the Alexander technique world. So I had to go from either nothing to leaving a session having it be explained reasonably well, or people had often read my newsletters or the Twitter threads. And I should actually mention, I think the newsletter came before the Zoom calls. So I decided the Twitter threads came first. Then I thought, okay, I need someone to write about this. Let me make a new newsletter, expanding awareness, as a place for this stuff to live. Then the Zoom calls happened. But the newsletter wasn't so much. It was part of the teaching process. It was kind of I often took the Twitter threads and made them more prosy, but it was very similar content, just with more elucidation around it, more context, more stuff that you can do in a newsletter or in a kind of a longer format than you can get away with in 10 tweets that I did together. So going back then to the video, the Zoom calls, I realized. So I did about that week of fairly intense sessions. That was pretty draining, but also really fun. I probably did too many looking back. Where's the camera? I should be looking over there somewhere. Cool. I then left it for a little while and carried on making the Twitter threads, carried on in the background. And I thought, okay, well, I have a waiting list. I had a waiting list of people kind of signing up via the link I put on Twitter. I had about 20 people. And I thought, okay, let me open up another number of evenings and weekends. So I basically used Calendly to just say, look, here are a bunch of Sunday evenings, Saturday mornings, some weekday evenings. If you want to fill in, like, just take a slot, you can. And they all went. I think I did 5 or 6 weeks worth of slots, and they all got filled up within a couple of days, I think. It was really surreal just seeing invite land in my diary. It's like, oh yeah, okay, cool, this is working. This is something worth paying attention to. And that, I think I had my last one of those last week or 2 weeks ago. I've now done 30 Zoom calls, first lesson Alexander technique introduction calls over Zoom with people around the world, which is awesome. The course evolved from that naturally, because I suddenly realized that, well, two things. One, figure out a way to keep my laptop screen from going dark. One was that I still had a waiting list of people I couldn't get to who didn't have a chance to sign up, but kind of emailing saying like, oh, I missed this shot, never mind, next time. And I still have about 20, 25 people on that waiting list, despite me not having promoted that link at all. And I don't want to fill my evenings and weekends doing Zoom calls. It's fun, but it's not how it's fun, but it's not how I haven't got much time. So I just don't want to keep doing that. At least not like that. But the other thing I realized was that in the end, after the 30 or so calls, the call format kind of converged on something. It landed on a process that I had found that worked for most people most of the time, to get them to have an experience that was novel for them, and say, okay, wow, there's something really here, in a more reliable way than, say, my first call, which was a bit more exploratory. So I realized that, okay, well, I'm basically going through a procedure now, with obviously looking at the person, how they responded, making allowances, adapting in real time, as you do on a call, which you can do, but you can't do asynchronously. But I had a common format, and I had more demand than I had time to supply it. So obviously, if I could just record myself going through this procedure, this sequence of steps, then I could share that and say, okay, rather than having a call with me, just go through this, and then we can have a call later on if you want. But this is a way of decoupling my time from my guidance, if you like, my teaching of the thing. So that led to the idea of, okay, well, maybe this can be course-worthy. And just to, I guess, caveat at this point, Alexander technique is the absolute last thing I'd have picked if I was thinking, I'm going to make a course. on any subject. It's traditionally taught in person using touch, over a series of lessons where you play with kind of physical activities, mainly sitting, standing, walking, catching, whatever it might be. So the idea that, okay, well, I'm a design technique teacher, I guess part-time around my main job, let me figure out a way of coursifying that. It just I would not have set out on the journey that I actually followed to be where I am now. And it's only because I was playful and exploratory and kind of seeing what came up that I'm now in a position that I'm in, that I think, okay, well, I do have a system, I do have an approach, and it does work. I have validation, I have an email list of 500 people, and I'm confident that when I open up my beta pre-launch this weekend, that I'll get 50 people, each pay me $50 to be part of that. So that's cool. It's awesome. It's strange, but I think the key here was that there's a constant back and forth, testing for resonance, testing for what worked, with people who are kind of newly into this set of ideas. They had their own backgrounds, their own ways of seeing this. So either they were completely fresh, perhaps, just interested in metaphysicsy things or the nature of awareness kind of conceptually, and they think, oh, this guy's saying interesting things. Or they were perhaps more advanced meditators who were seeing this was a kind of a jigsaw piece in the wider awareness puzzle, if you like. So the fact that I could go back and forth with people really allowed me to co-develop this thing. A lot of the teaching methods I've put in place here they're things that I did in my own training, so they're inspired by my own teacher and the guest teachers that we had in, but also my own thinking about what Alexander technique actually is. And ultimately, all of this is really, I think, in aid of me trying to figure out what actually is this thing that I've learned. And that's why I'm really excited for the course, because it's not just me giving more people a first lesson experience. There's going to be a community attached to it, and the course will be a lifetime access sort of community thing behind it. So the first 50 people will join a circle community. They'll have to talk to each other and to me and say, well, hey, this worked, this didn't work, have you read this? What is this thing? Like, how have you tried this? I find this works quite well from my tradition. And over time, I want to cultivate a space where people can talk about whatever this expanded awareness, non-doing, and there's more from my design technique that I haven't really gone into because I'm not sure how to talk about it yet, but ultimately we'll get there. And then as time goes on, I can carry on this real-time with real people testing process, only more and more targeted, and as part of a kind of a curated, cultivated community. So it's the same process as on Twitter and as on the Zoom calls and the newsletter, but it just becomes more sophisticated and allows me to go deeper. And since people are buying once and having infinite access, as my own understanding increases, as my teaching methods improve, and as I learn more from people taking the course, I can go deeper and deeper and deeper into teaching the more advanced stuff and teaching the basics in a more direct way, and ultimately help people apply this stuff into their lives in a way that I think currently isn't possible in the online context, or it hasn't been done very much in the online context. And it's really frustrating, I think, when someone comes across Alexander technique or some of the related concepts, they ask a teacher or someone, how do I learn this? And they say, oh, go and see a teacher. And even then, from what I've heard from some people, I'm getting lots of DMs about this, people have confusing experiences. They go along and they don't know what they're doing. They said, oh, just walk around in a certain way. Is it all kind of, it's about sitting? Like, no, it's not. It's all of these things are a reflection that they've missed the point, which I think is not their fault. It's the fact that they weren't shown it in a way that helped them understand the point. And that's kind of what this is about. The fact that I can't give people a hands-on experience has forced me to really think through, well, what experience can I give people through this medium? And therefore, what actually is this thing if it isn't actually mediated through touch, as the way it's taught commonly? So what is it then? Well, that's interesting. There's something in that worth exploring, because there's something about what it means to be a human that we can play with and we can explore and use as a kind of virtual training environment as to how our awareness works, how it intersects with our ways of being, and how we can bring it into our conscious control. And that's something I want to go really deeply into. So this is now 15 minutes long. Wow, okay. I will stop here. It's good ad-libbing. I think it's fun. I'm going to do more of this. And yeah, see you next time.